it was a Sunday morning, and I got a phone call from one of my contract managers who was on a site in regional Queensland, and I answered the call. I said, "How you going?" And he said, "We've just killed someone." Foolishly, looking back at it now, I said, "You're joking. You're joking." And he said, "I wouldn't effing joke about that." Yeah, so that was a Sunday. I jumped in the car and drove 3 hours out straight to site, and all the way out there, I had no idea what I was about to be faced with. And I'm sort of driving to site, trying to take all this in as a young leader who didn't really have any idea what to do. I think, one of the things I learnt from that is I wanted to be as honest as I could with the employees, and I didn't want to lie to them.
Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast. This episode, proudly sponsored by the Guinea Group of Companies, an organisation that helps leaders upgrade their mindset, upskill their leadership, and uplift their teams. If you would like the opportunity to sponsor an episode of our podcast, please reach out to the team at the Guinea Group, theguineagroup.com.au, the team at theguineagroup.com.au. Can't wait to hear from you. And if you would like to be a podcast guest, click on the information sheet that is available on the podcast page. Mate, David Zropf, the Executive Director, Service Stream. Been in that role since 2022. Mate, talk us through it. David Zropf, Executive Director, Service Stream.
Yeah, you're right. I've been in this role for just over 3 years now, 3.5 years. We provide contracted services, maintenance, operations, project services to asset owners across the country. So I look after the utilities part of the business, which is water, power, gas, industrials. Mm-hmm. We've got about 3,000 employees, give or take, depending on our project portfolio at any sort of given time, but that's about where we average out at the moment. I got about 130 live contracts on the go, and we turn over about $1 billion annually. It's great. I've really enjoyed my time here. I came in on the back of a pretty significant acquisition that the business made in 2021, and I joined in 22, and my role was to try and integrate that new business into Service Stream, and it's been heaps of fun.
Good on you, mate. Good on you. But mate, you've had an extremely successful career, because I can remember that you were an electrical apprentice back in the day, mate.
True.
So just for our listeners, David, who have got, I guess, aspirations to go from, say, tradesperson, and mate, we've got a female electrician coming on soon to talk about women in trades. What would you coach someone to get from, say, electrical apprentice to executive director? I know that's a really tough question, and it probably wasn't one on the list, but what have you learned during your sort of career progression?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey along the way. I did start on the tools, as you mentioned. I spent my time in construction, working fly in, fly out, and found myself working for a contractor, providing maintenance services on a refinery in Gladstone, and worked my way up through that organisation. I spent 14 years there and just bounced my way through different roles and different opportunities. And I think one of the biggest things for me, Anton, was just to say yes when opportunities come knocking. And every time there seemed to be something put in front of me, I just said, well, yeah, I'll give that a crack. I'll have a go at doing that. And I think you need two things to be successful, and to grow your career. You need someone to give you a go, and someone to back you, and then you need to deliver for that person. And I was very fortunate along the way to have a couple of really important managers of mine that gave me a chance at a really young age when in reflection, um, wasn't ready, certainly wasn't experienced enough to take on those opportunities when I look back at it now, but they were willing to give me a go. And I worked my backside off to deliver for them so that I didn't let them down, and that led to the next opportunity. So I think being open to saying yes to things when they come your way, and take what you can out of every opportunity. There was certainly a few things along the way that I didn't love, but you learn things from those opportunities as well.
There's, there's crappy parts of every job, David, in there, no matter
Yeah,
what level you're at, whether you're on the tools or whether you're an executive director. There's bits that aren't that much fun at times.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mate, that was an exceptional answer. That's next level. Find someone. I'm just going to change the order. Find someone to back you, and when they do, and they ask you to do something, say yes. But not only say yes, deliver for them, and let them know that you value that opportunity, and that you're going to walk over broken glass to make sure that you value them, and say thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of externalize their career development and say, well, who's gonna give me my opportunity, and why haven't I been given the chances that other people have been given? And I think I see a fair bit of that. But I think we all own and have accountability for our own career development, and you know, delivering on the opportunity is the key element to get the next one. So, yep, you need someone to back you along the way, and sooner or later someone will. But if you don't deliver for them, then those opportunities dry up pretty quick.
Mate, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, on the topic of influence, and I always mention that influence is that the effect on, or the capacity to have an effect on behavior, character, or the development of something or someone. Um, you've got 130 project fronts going on at any one time, David. How do you, as a senior leader, I guess, influence, and maybe you don't influence sort of right down to the work front. Maybe it's your ELT that you influence. Like for you, what is influence about, and what does influence mean to you?
Yeah, I did have a think about this because it's not something that I consciously think about in my day-to-day world. It's sort of a byproduct of the things that I do, I suppose. But for me, the way I considered it is you're going to influence the people around you, and whether you like to admit it or not, you are having an influence. The only decision you need to make is what kind of influence you want to have. And that's a reflection on some of the, experiences I've had along the way, where you might have been working for people that, have a completely different way of working to you. Maybe they've got a different value set or a different style that really doesn't mesh with yours. Um, and you might think, well, I don't really want to be influenced by someone like that, but you are influenced by them. It's just that you're taking on, ways that you might choose not to do things when you get the opportunity to sit in the same seat. So I think as a leader, you just got to acknowledge that you're going to have an influence, and you've got to make a decision what kind of influence you want to have. Um, as for, the breadth of my personal influence, I think it does start to diminish as the layers go out in the organisation, and one of our employees who are working on one of our sites, in a remote location, may not necessarily be directly influenced by me, but I think they're influenced by the environment that we create as leaders. And my job is to facilitate and create that environment within our business, and I do that through my team, my senior leadership team, my general managers, and I think recruiting and promoting and filling those roles with the right people is one of the most critical decisions you can make as an executive, because you can't be everywhere, and you can't
Mm.
you can't create the micro cultures that exist on site. but only the leaders who lead those sites can. So, putting the right people in the right roles is really important, and then spending time with my leadership team to make sure that I create that environment, which hopefully does have an influence on the way people work in our business, and I focus on clarity, clarity of direction, and being really clear about what we stand for as a team and where we're going. High on accountability, um, high on transparency and openness, and balance. I mean, we get all sorts of news come our way every day: good news, bad news,
Course.
indifferent news, and how you respond to that really matters, particularly bad news. And one of the things that I always like to say is um, a good indication of the strength of your culture is the speed of bad news. Because if bad news is traveling fast, then you know that you don't have people hiding things, or they're afraid to report things, or they're trying to solve problems that is beyond their capacity. They're actually willing to reach out for help and support, and that's an indicator to me that we're building a reasonable culture within the business. And I try and create some fun and enjoyment about it as well, because you spend a lot of time and hours at work, and you want to get some personal enjoyment and satisfaction out of it. So there's some of the sort of things that I try and create, and focus on the environment, which I think has an influence, even if I'm not personally influencing the people who are doing the work.
Mate, I think you've gone to the top of the class. That's cool today. Um, unbelievable answers. And what I loved about, I've never thought about the speed of bad news. Like, so we always say that the quality of a leader will be determined by how well they respond to bad news, David.
Yep.
Because bad news is uncomfortable. So do you lose it, or do you stay calm, cool, and collected? But that speed of bad news is really around psychological safety. You just explained psych safety. Then, are people willing and open, comfortable to reach out for help? Maybe share that they've made a mistake, David.
Yep. Absolutely.
And talk about, or a safety incident, for example, and I think that psych safety piece is such an important element in 2025 organisations. And, you've obviously got that in spades, and that's probably part of that influence piece. Mate, let's just take a step back, if we could, just back to the question previously. Now, you've influenced your EGMs, and I love when you said, we're going to have an influence on others regardless. It's going to be a good or a bad influence. So why don't you choose the type of influence you're going to have? Who influenced you the most, mate? I should have asked you this sort of a few minutes ago, but can you look back on your career and think of one person that was really influential for you?
There's been a few. I mean, I think personally, it's hard not to acknowledge that you're heavily influenced by your parents as you're growing up. And I think, your personal network influences you, your friends, your family. My dad was a self-employed, ran his own business, and so just had an incredible work ethic. 7 days a week. You would know, running your own business, Anton, what it takes to put that effort in. And so I see some of that in me. And my mum was really is really high on empathy. She's one of the kindest people I know, and a bit spontaneous and funny. And I think that's influenced me a little bit as well, for sure. But from a career point of view, I mentioned earlier, I've had some people that have backed me along the way, and they've been really, really key to my success in learning from them, learning that balance. And when I say balance, I mean, talking about that reception of bad news and how to take it in a way that, encourages people to bring it forward. I mean, we've seen organisations fail, catastrophically fail, because bad news hasn't been shared, right? Projects that have gone sour over a long period of time, and through whatever reason, environmental, cultural reasons, no one's comfortable to put their hand up and say this thing's going south really quickly, and all of a sudden it gets too big to recover. And so you want to know early. So I had some really good managers that taught me around that balance. I also had some managers that were the opposite, and as I said earlier, that taught me sort of what not to do. So yeah, I mean, I had probably two or three really key leaders throughout my career that have shaped the way I work. But I'll tell you a story. I did a 360 leadership program where there was a survey, and you could ask your peers and your boss and your employees to give you some feedback on your style, etc. And I was having a big clash with a peer of mine, a general manager of finance at the time, and I was all focused on the operations, and they were all focused on finance, and we were clashing in our day-to-day work.
Okay.
And I put them down as a respondent for my 360, and he called me and he said,
Are you sure?
Are you serious? Are you serious? You want me to answer this? And I said, well, yeah, I do actually. I'd love for you to take the time to answer it. And I mean, he was older than me. I was a young GM. You know, I became a GM in my early 30s, and I was surrounded by people that were 10, 20 years my senior. And he was very experienced and very senior. And he said, listen, I'll answer the survey. You'll know my answers. They're all anonymous, but you'll know my answers when you see them. But when you get the results, ring me and I'll step you through every answer I gave and why I gave it. And I said, oh, okay, fair enough. So off the survey went, and sure enough, I got the feedback, and you could see some of the, feedback in there. And so I called him up, and, without going through all the gory detail, the message that he had for me was, you are being, or trying to be, your manager. You're trying to just replicate the way they operate, and that's not you. It's not you or your style, and it's not authentic. And you should lead the way you want to lead, not the way your current manager leads. And at that time, I did have a manager who was, sort of kick the front door down, kind of, we will barge our way through and be successful because we'll do it, in a bullish way. And so that's the way I was leading. And I must admit, I probably just thought, oh, well, this is what it means to be in this role, and I should just act that way. And it was a great piece of advice, because it made me stop and reflect, well, who am I, and how do I want to lead? And just be yourself and bring authenticity to the table. But, it was a great piece of advice. And when I think about who influenced me, they definitely took the time to provide that feedback. And the feedback is a gift and all of those things. It was hard to hear, and I needed to swallow some ego and all of those things. But it was a real pivotal moment for me to determine, well, what kind of leader do I want to be? And you're only a leader if you've got people following you, right? You can be a leader by title, but you're not really leading anyone unless you've got people following. So I needed to sort of pivot a little on my style.
David Zropf, unbelievably insightful. Thank you so much. We often say to leaders that you are a reflection of your leader. So make sure you choose all the good. And if there's anything not so great, leave that behind. Mate, we do 360s all the time. I delivered one yesterday, and we've got coaching clients, Dave, from 19 to in their 60s. We've got, if our 19-year-old was born 1 year later, we'd have 5 generations, because 5 is born in 2005. Generation Alpha starts in 2006, and we've delivered some really cool 360s. And I've seen the impact of delivering a 360 that is difficult. So hats off to you to being so open to feedback because a lot of people won't send the survey to the person that won't give them great results.
Yeah.
Mate, that's an open mindset. Thank you. Unbelievable. So obviously we're doing influence, mate. What what would you coach a leader? What do you say to your EGMs, for example? Like, if you said to them, this is our vision, these are our values at Service Stream, we need to get this out to the front line, we need everyone, to create this environment. How do you coach a leader to be more influential, David? Like, what are the skills? What are the skill set?
Yeah, well, I think I think as Aussies, we tend to have a pretty effective BS monitor, and we can understand and sense pretty quickly when someone is just sort of phoning it in, and they're not actually buying into the message, and they're not committed, or they're only doing something because they kind of have to. And I think authenticity is the key marker there, that people need to feel like they're dealing with a leader who is genuine and is authentic and is transparent enough and honest and open enough to build that sort of trusting relationship.
Mm,
Um,
love
and I
that.
think there's a credibility piece to it as well, Anton. I think we want to know that our leaders have got the skills to lead us to where we want to go. So, and I think that might be a little, cultural in the way we work as Aussies as well. We don't love the sales pitch. We'd love to know that the person that's talking to us has been there, done it, got the credibility under the belt, got the experience, and we believe in them. And I think that's really important. I think we've spoken about being calm under pressure.
Yeah,
Pressure situations bring out all sorts of emotional responses, um, I've been in a few really high pressure situations in my time, and what I realised at going through those experiences is that people are looking to the leader for reassurance and confidence that, hey, I've got this. We're okay. We'll get through this, whether that's some sort of financial challenge or whatever it might be, safety incident, whatever. Being calm under pressure and saying, look, we've got a plan, we've got a pathway through this, and here's what we're going to do. I think being decisive, having good decision-making skills is really important for a leader, and creates a lot of influence.
Cool.
I don't know if people are loving fence sitters. It's like, well, let's make a call, and we'll make the call based on the best information we've got at the time. And if it turns out to be wrong, that's okay as well. We'll pivot, but let's make a decision and do some stuff. So that's some of the sort of traits I try and get into our leadership team, so that so that we are effective, and we're not just, a leadership team by name only, but we're actually leading the business.
Great answer. Great answer. Authenticity, genuine. And I think what came through there too, David, was excuse me, we had Mrs. G as a guest speaker at one of our 2-day programs. It was a Saturday morning, and I said, Mrs. G, just imagine there was a leadership coach who needed a guest speaker on a Saturday. She said, no, not again. And this particular group, and it was extreme, actually, extreme engineering in town.
Oh, yeah.
Extreme.
Yep.
You know what, they asked Mrs. G, what's the most important trait of a leader? And she said, show me, don't tell me.
Mm.
And I think that's sort of what you were alluding to there. We want people who are either going to decide they're going to be calm under pressure, demonstrate leadership. Don't tell me that you're a leader. And that's such a well said. Can I ask you, like, when we talked about doing this, and I know it's going to be really personal for you, you've been and you said it was okay to ask you this question, or I wouldn't have if you didn't. Just having been through, my background is obviously an electrical incident, and we've worked with organisations. We do obviously physical safety, but now it's more psych safety as well. You've been through some fatalities, David Zropf. Very quickly, mate, if you could, just for everyone's benefit out there, what it looks and feels like to be a senior leader who has that in their org chart, and the impact on your life, and maybe how you got through that, mate.
Yeah, it was traumatic and certainly life-changing. I was a new leader. Like I mentioned earlier, I got into senior leadership roles reasonably young and reasonably inexperienced. And I landed in the general manager role, in September, about well, probably 10 years ago now. And yeah, uh, you know, I got handed. I was in charge of quite a large business. It was East Coast operations, not as big as the organisation I look after today, but certainly had people all up and down the East Coast, and probably $400 or $500 million worth of work a year. And as a young guy, I was sort of in the headlights and trying to work it all out. And about 10 weeks after I got the job, it was a Sunday morning, and I got a phone call from one of my contract managers who was on a site in regional Queensland, and I answered the call. I said, "How you going?" And he said, "We've just killed someone." And like, foolishly, looking back at it now, I said, "You're joking. You're joking." And he said, "I wouldn't effing joke about that," and got quite angry that I would suggest that he'd joke at it. And it was just an immediate sort of verbal response that just come out of me. But yeah, so that was a Sunday. I jumped in the car and drove 3 hours out straight to site. And all the way out there, I had no idea what I was about to be faced with. And I was on the phone to one of the support services for our business at the time, our employee assistance program, and they were talking me through sort of what to expect when you get there. There's going to be WorkSafe and legal requirements. You're going to have employees that are going to be looking for answers. You got a client who's going to be looking for, legal privilege and protecting themselves, and you've got your own organisational activities. You've got a family who's going to be looking for answers, potential social media, and I'm sort of driving to site, trying to take all this in as a young leader who didn't really have any idea what to do. And I spent a week there, met with employees twice a day, and we worked our way through the process. Went and met with the family, which was incredibly difficult to do. And of course, they're looking for answers. And I think, I mentioned earlier that people in moments of crisis look for their leaders to provide that calmness under pressure. And I think it was adrenaline that got me through, Anton, to be honest. I was just like, I was on autopilot. I was so tactical. And so it was, what do we need to do in the next few hours? And let's get through this, bang, bang, bang. But at the end of each day, I'd go back to my motel room at 10 o'clock at night or whatever it was. And you'd get this sort of emotional release of, exhaustion. And then you'd front up at the pre-start the next day and you'd go again. But I think, one of the things I learnt from that is I wanted to be as honest as I could with the employees, and I didn't want to lie to them. So I took the approach of saying, when they were asking questions that I knew the answer to, but I also knew that I couldn't tell them, either because, we hadn't spoken to family members yet, or there was some legal privilege, or we're still working through it. I took the approach to say, look, I know the answer to that question, but I can't share that with you now. And the reason why I can't share that with you now is because of these following things. But I just didn't want to say, oh, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or make up some other sort of excuse or whatever. And I said to them on the very first day, I'm going to tell you everything I can. I'm going to be as open as I can with you, but you need to acknowledge there's some stuff that I'm not going to be able to share straight away. And so every day I'd be getting questions, and some I could answer, and some I would say, look, look, we know the answer to that, but I can't tell you that right now. It will come in due course, but right now we're not able to share that information. And it was a complete disaster. It rocked me really hard, and I picked myself up and kept going. And I guess the kicker to the story is 10 months later, there was a second fatality in our business. And this time I was in Melbourne, and it was a mining event in regional Queensland, and I got the same phone call, although it was a slightly a different situation in that we knew there was an incident, but we didn't know who was involved, how serious it was. The mine was in lockdown. They'd taken all the phones off our staff and put them in crib rooms, and no one could access anything in terms of information. And people were seeing helicopters fly in, but not knowing what the outcomes were. And it was really hard to get information. So we didn't know for hours and hours what the outcome was, but it ended up being one of our employees was fatally injured on that site that day. And it nearly broke me, to be fair. I actually said to my boss at the time, we've got at that time, hundreds of employees or maybe 1,000 employees up and down the East Coast, and I can't control what happens on a daily basis. Personally, I can't control that. I've got scaffolders on an offshore platform in Bass Strait. I've got welders inside a tank in a refinery. I've got underground maintenance workers in a coal mine. I got power station employees working on multiple levels, all across different states, all across different client sites, all across different sort of regional areas. How am I meant to control all of this? And because I can't, I'm out. I can't do this a third time. So I'll get through the aftermath of this fatality and I'll get the business back on its feet. But I'm out. I can't do this again. And it was maybe a bit of time, and as emotions died down a little, and it was actually my wife that said, well, the industry needs people who've experienced these things to help make it a better place. And so she was the one that said, I don't think walking away is the right thing to do, because no one cares more than you do right now, and no one's going to work harder to make the changes that need to be made. So why don't you stick around and make those changes? And it was good advice, but it was really hard, and it does change it. It shapes the way you lead, definitely. I mean, for months after those events, I didn't have one conversation with my organisation about our financial performance, not one. And that's because everybody realises what really matters. And so, when you stand up in front of a crew and say, nothing matters more than getting home safely to your family, there's a risk that they sort of go, oh yeah, we've heard our managers say this for our whole careers, but when it comes to the crunch, we know what you really care about. There's that cynicism that can come with those kind of statements.
100%.
And so I share that story because I want them to genuinely believe that that's what I care about, and there actually isn't anything more important, because I've lived through it, and I know that when those sorts of things happen, and no one cared about the profitability of the business for a period after. It's like, whatever. We didn't even talk about it. It was like, well, how are we dealing with this event, and how are we recovering from it as a business and as a team? And I know that there are people that are still not working today because of those events and the way it impacted them. People that were on site and witnessed the accidents. So that's had life-changing events for multiple people across multiple different businesses, and I stay in touch with those family members now every year, and just check in and let them know that I still remember, and I'm still caring, and I'm still trying to make it a better industry. So,
well, one day in 3 to 6 or 9 months' time, can we do part 2?
Yeah, sure.
and go a little bit deeper on that, because I think that care factor that's come out. My background, and I've coached leaders in your position that rang one day and said, Anton, I can't make my session today because we had a fatality today. And I've sort of had to, I've never had a fatality in my org chart, thank God, when I was sort of superintendent manager level. But but I've seen how it impacted my own family and, and other families. So, mate, thank you so much for sharing. We've got so much more to talk about. I know that we only had half an hour on our calendar. I'm going to value your time.
I can keep
Two
going.
very quick ones. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. I got time. I put a buffer. I put a buffer at the back end because I thought we'd get chatting, knowing our history of chats.
And Deb, what did I say just before the session?
Make them an hour.
Make him an hour.
Yeah.
I said to Deb, half an hour is going to be too short. Thank you, mate.
You're going to have some editing to do to cut this into a bite-sized piece, mate.
Oh no, mate, I'm telling you, and at the risk of offending our other podcast guests, this has been next level. So I can't thank you enough. So, mate, leadership life mantra. Like, have you got the catchphrase, the one-liner that could go on the whiteboard and just go?
I don't. It's that, and I never have. It's not really my style, to have that sort of thing. But I do have some, I guess, some principles, and we've touched on most of them, to be honest. Clarity is key for me, and nothing kills performance more than misalignment. And you can get the hardest working, most conscientious, most capable team, but if they're pulling in different directions, then you're not going to ultimately achieve your goals. And so I think it's up to the leader to provide that clarity, to say, well, here's where we are going as a team, and to make sure that everyone is aligned and bought into that purpose. And not only the goal, but how we're going to get there. And so be a little tactical and not just aspirational with respect to here's where we want to be ultimately, but here's some interim steps that I think will help us get there. So let's start taking steps. So clarity for me is really important. I mentioned earlier that the quality of the team around you, hiring, promoting, putting the right people in the right roles is absolutely essential to a leader's success. You cannot do everything, and you need to rely on your team to be, at their best and doing what they need to do. It's a team effort, and so working with people to bring them up to speed and upskill them, provided they've got a growth mindset and they're willing to take on feedback and willing to get on board is great. But you cannot endure poor performance or poor behaviours for too long, because not only does it kill the mission, but it kills the performance of the people around them. So they're hard decisions to make as a leader, but it's really, really important that your team is the right people in the right roles, performing at the right levels. So that's critical to success. Just creating that environment. And I mentioned earlier, having a bit of fun along the way. I think it's important. We spend a lot of time at work, traveling away from family, late nights, particularly, well, I guess in any space, but in my world, in the contracting space, late nights building tenders and getting projects in, and if you don't have a team that's willing to put in that discretionary effort, then you're up against it big time. And everyone's got to enjoy their time at work, get some satisfaction out of it, have a bit of fun along the way, enjoy the relationships that they build with their peers, and feel supported. And so there's some of the things that I kind of live by. It's not a mantra. I don't have a saying, that I sort of write on the wall. I don't have the Ted Lasso believe poster. But for me, I just sort of authenticity, balance, care, and drive are the kind of things that I focus myself around. So the ABCD, that's sort of where I'm at.
Whoa! Clarity, balance, care,
authenticity,
support.
Balance, care, and drive.
Wow. That's so cool. Ted Lasso, be like a goldfish and forget the tough stuff very quickly. Don't dwell on it. I love that. Thank you so much, David. Legend, mate. Mate, final question of today. Who would you recommend I get on next? Who would be another great podcast guest who is of your ilk?
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure. There's been some. I mean, in my industry, there's some fantastic executives that I think I can put you in touch with that
That'd be great.
would have a great perspective. And I'll be happy to tip you into a few of them. I know.
Thank you.
No, without name dropping right now, I think I can definitely recommend some great people in my world, in this world that I live in.
Thank you.
But I see you've also had some cracking guests from other industries, sporting superstars and athletes, and they're great because they all bring a different perspective. I mean, my career, my life is a very thin wedge of this world. So yeah, seeing what else is out there is it's great, good to see, good to listen to.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, been really lucky actually that people like yourself are giving of their time, because we don't do this unless you're willing to commit some resources. We've had a prep chat, now we've done this, and that's time that you're not spending with your team. So I never underestimate or undervalue people's time, because it's the resource we don't get back. So I'm very grateful. And if you are happy, I love people from the construction industry or from your industry, contractor industry, whatever you call it, because it's just another, it's sometimes for corporate people, it's an industry they don't see. They see big stuff going on, but they don't actually know what people like you do. You manage these projects and different types of trade skills and all the rest of it. And so no, it's really cool, and I'd appreciate that, mate. Look, can't thank you enough. You've been just super duper. I really appreciate your time, and actually, I'm going to hope some of the conversations we've had today have been around some of the services we delivered, mate. I'm going to reach out to you offline if that's okay, and just see if there's anything that maybe we can support you with moving forward.
No worries, Anton. Happy to.
Mate, you're a legend. Thank you so much, David Zropf. I'm going to leave this now, and we'll be in touch, and I'll let you know when it's out.
Thanks, buddy. Talk
Thanks,
soon.
Thanks, mate. See you, champion. Thanks for listening. We just had an amazing guest on to another amazing podcast of Find Your Influence. My name's Anton Guinea, and for 20 years, I have been working with, training, coaching, and consulting leaders at all levels of organizations. I have coached Gen Z leaders right through to baby boomer leaders. I've done 1,500 one-on-one leadership coaching sessions. My mission on this planet is to help leaders create high-performing and psychologically safe teams. If you want to upgrade your leadership, upskill your teams, or upskill your leadership, please reach out. You can get me at anton@theguineagroup.com.au. Please tune into our next episode. These podcast chats are amazing. The value and the information that you get will help you be more influential and help you be a better leader.